The album is a piece of storytelling where we chose animals and we personified them with stories of humans, guised as stories of animals.
Well, I think that every band member had an affinity to certain songs, either because they brought the sonic idea in, or they suggested the name of or an animal for the sonic idea.
So, whenever you're thinking about an album, there's so many ways to go with it, and very popular, especially during the late 60s and 70s, were concept albums. I think starting with Sgt. Pepper or Pet Sounds, even with the Beach Boys, Sgt. Pepper's with the Beatles. You know, this idea of the concept album emerges and becomes very popular. So being fans of that period of music, you know, and especially Pink Floyd, who had lots of concept albums, we decided that it was time to really focus in on doing something more conceptual. And so we sat at my kitchen table, as we often have, and had some food and had conversation. And the conversation led us to the idea of the urban animals. At first it was talking about Son Jarocho and how Son Jarocho is oftentimes talks about nature, and so we were questioning or investigating really our natural surroundings, and within those natural surroundings, what are the animals that exist in the city, you know, besides us, because we are in fact animals. And so we thought, wow, okay, well let's do some research on how these other animals go about the city, you know, so different from us, because many of these creatures were here before we were here. And so how do they negotiate the encroachment of metropolis, you know, upon them, and what are the things how have they reacted, how they responded to that. So that was the idea.
When we started working on the album, we decided upon we decided to embrace limitations, to set forth a set of limitations, and to write the album according to those limitations. So the guidelines, or limitations rather, were that it had to be acoustic, except for one, you know, in the bass. They had to be acoustic, and it had to be something that we would be able to perform live exactly how we performed it on the record.
Actually, this album was recorded live. So we played all together, all the songs. It took like 3 days, and we recorded it all live. So we were separated, of course, so that, you know, we could deal with the individual, you know, instruments, but everybody was playing together. So we basically would play the song maybe 3 times or 4 times, and just run the song, you know.
Musically, what we talked about was putting some parameters, and I got this idea from my good friend Akira Bach. And Akira talked about the advantage of putting parameters, and how that oftentimes challenges you to be more creative. And so we talked about that concept, and we said, okay, well, let's try that. And so the first thing they said was, okay, Quetzal, you can't plug in your guitars. Okay, it's got to be earthy, it's got to be natural, it's got to be acoustic. And the second thing was the idea about the animals. And the third thing was, let's record this together. Let's record it together, and no overdubs. Let's just be a unit. And so we're going to rehearse in that way. So we did approach it in that old school way where you don't mess around in the studio. You don't, you know, you're not exploring in the studio. Besides the fact that the reality is that we don't have the money to explore in the studio. So we spent a lot of time rehearsing and demoing and in our own home studios, and we kind of just built the repertoire that way. And so you hear it and it sounds, it doesn't sound really like super produced. It doesn't sound super polished. It sounds great, but you know, I feel like we maintained the integrity of the unit playing together.
Honestly, as a cello player, a lot of what I was doing was just getting out of the way, because there was a vibe that was really happening between Marta and Tailana, and between Juan and Alberto and Quetzal. You know, there was something that was really going on right there, and for me, I could recognize that, and at the time, Tailana and my baby was born, so a lot of it was just me holding the baby and just listening, and yeah, just getting out of the way and letting this thing happen. And when something would, you know, when an idea would come and I was ready and I knew it was a good idea, I would bring it and people were receptive to it. I have so much appreciation that there's that family respect and that dynamic, and there's a lot of love right there. It was a joy all the way through.
Working within your limitations, working with the limited resources sometimes yields really more interesting ideas.
I oftentimes listen to it and I hear two compositions. I hear the song, which is lyrics, melody, and then the harmony behind it, and then I hear the string section.
Because it's a more fluid, percussive kind of rhythmscape that we came up for the songs, it forced Juan, the bass player, to play in a different way. It forced the string players as well, who they're used to playing very rhythmically as well, because they play in like charanga band and so on. But it was sort of like how to get them doing this thing, this hybrid thing, forced them to think in other ways, and to create a different, like lush stringscape where usually they would have to do a rhythmic thing and so on. We really explored musically how to not do the obvious. In some cases we did kind of very standardized type of things, but only in very few cases. Most of the time we were just trying to come up with a way of expressing an idea differently than we usually would. You know, having the percussion play differently, having the bass play different, having the guitars or the jaranas do something that they normally wouldn't do, and things like that, yeah.
The writing process. You know, the writing process generally was somebody brings in an idea, and then everyone attacks it and tries to realize the potential of that idea. And it was a great time. Everyone worked so hard and so diligently and was very respectful of people's ideas, you know. And another thing that we really worked hard on was to not go for what we call the stock idea. So if something sounded like it could have been a cumbia, you know, which is something that we're familiar with and that we can go to, you know, we would purposefully not go there and resist going there and try to like massage around it and create, you know, develop hybrid rhythms. Especially Alberto, Juan, and myself, we really worked hard on that. and not letting the, or if it sounded like, you know, like a son jarocho piece, like El Colas or something like that, we worked really hard not to play that and to move away from those ideas and try to create different sounds, you know, try to challenge ourselves in that way.
We're good out here if you guys are happy with your monitors and everything. If there's anything else you need.
To me, firmly fixed in ambiguity or firmly comfortable in this idea around navigating different worlds, right, is really a phrase that comes from Anzaldua's idea around border consciousness and understanding this moment of living, breathing, being born into understanding the fact that you are, in order to survive, you are navigating 2 or more worlds. And I think that's a perfect phrase that really captures how people of color think of themselves in this world. I would say that that phrase is related to this album by understanding when we put ourselves in the position of these animals and the kinds of things that they had to survive and do in order to survive, right? When we had a chance to really think about the different animals that we wrote about and live through their eyes, live and survive in their worlds, I think that we really got to know ourselves a bit more in our survival strategies and realized that we were very much in sync with what they were living. We can relate to them in more ways than we really thought.